John Mearsheimer just explained why Israel is pushing for a war with Iran that could trap the United States in a forever conflict while China and Russia consolidate power across Eurasia. And what he revealed about the strategic logic behind this decision should terrify anyone paying attention to where American foreign policy is heading. The question at the center of this is simple. Why would Israel want a war with Iran when the last time they fought, in June's 12-day conflict, Israel had to beg the United States to end it because they were running out of defensive missiles and Iranian ballistic attacks were penetrating their defenses? Why would they push for escalation now when the risks are even higher? Mearsheimer's answer is stark. Israel sees a closing window of opportunity, and they are willing to accept massive damage to their own country if it means using American military power to destroy Iran permanently. Let's go back to June. The 12-day war, June 13th to June 25th. Israel was getting pounded. Iranian ballistic missiles were increasingly sophisticated at penetrating Israeli defenses. Israel, a very small country extremely vulnerable to missile attacks, was running out of the defensive systems needed to protect itself. So Israel pushed the United States to end the war. They needed it to stop. Fast forward to January 14th of this year. It looked like President Trump was going to launch strikes on Iran. The bombers were loaded. But at the last moment, Trump decided not to attack. And one of the two reasons he held back was because Prime Minister Netanyahu asked him not to. Netanyahu said Israel was not in a position to defend itself. Now compare that to today. Israel is actively pushing the United States to attack Iran, not asking for restraint, not expressing concerns about readiness, pushing for war. What changed? Mearsheimer argues two things changed, one tactical and one strategic. Tactically, the United States has more defensive assets in the region now than it had in January. American systems can do a somewhat better job protecting Israel from Iranian ballistic missiles. Not a perfect job. A lot of missiles will still get through, but better than before. Strategically, and this is the critical part, Israel believes the window for destroying Iran is closing fast. And they are willing to gamble everything on this moment because they see it as now or never. Here is why. First, China and Russia are moving in to help Iran in a big way. Anyone who studies geopolitics understands that over time, Chinese and Russian support for Iran will only increase. That is basic balance of power logic. As the United States pressures Iran, Iran's partnerships with Beijing and Moscow deepen. More technology transfer, more military cooperation, more economic integration. Second, Iran has figured out that ballistic missiles are their strategic equalizer. They are going to develop more of them. They are going to develop hypersonic variants that will be nearly impossible to intercept. They can damage Israel significantly now. But in 5 years, 10 years, the capability will be devastating. Israel's defensive systems will not be able to cope. So from Israel's perspective, this is the window. If they are going to use American military power to destroy Iran, to achieve regime change, to break the country apart the way Syria was broken apart, this is the only chance. The longer they wait, the stronger Iran becomes, and the more support Iran receives from China and Russia. Now you might say this logic is insane. That even if the window is closing, launching a war Israel might not be able to control is reckless. And Mearsheimer agrees it is extremely risky. But he argues that states pursue extremely risky military strategies when the political forces pushing them toward war are powerful enough. And Israel views Iran as an existential threat, not a manageable competitor. An existential threat that must be eliminated now, while elimination is still theoretically possible. This is where it gets dangerous for the United States. Because what Israel wants is not a limited strike. Israel wants the United States to wreck Iran. Regime change plus territorial breakup. That requires a massive sustained campaign. Not days, weeks, maybe months. And as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Charles Q. Brown, has made clear, the United States does not have the capability to sustain that kind of operation without massive costs. But here is Israel's calculation. Once the United States gets into the war, once it begins to escalate, America will have no choice but to continue. It will be like Ukraine. Once you are in these big fights, they are hard to get out of. And Israel wants to get the United States into the fight. President Trump has said clearly he does not want a forever war. But that is not Israel's concern. From Israel's perspective, if the United States does not achieve quick, decisive victory and the conflict turns into a forever war, that is actually acceptable. Because it means the United States remains committed to destroying Iran. And eventually, with enough time and resources, the United States will succeed. Israel gets what it wants either way. Quick victory or long, grinding war that keeps America committed. Now step back and look at this from the perspective of American grand strategy. The United States should be operating as an offshore balancer. The goal of offshore balancing is to prevent any single power from dominating Eurasia by ensuring that Eurasian powers balance each other, not by establishing a heavy permanent American presence that causes those powers to unite against the United States. The logic is straightforward. If the United States maintains a light touch, Eurasian rivals like Russia, China, and regional powers compete with each other. But if the United States establishes hegemonic presence, those rivals have incentive to cooperate against American dominance. That exhausts the United States while creating exactly the kind of hostile coalition America wants to avoid. So what should American strategy look like? The United States should have good relations with Russia because China, not Russia, is the peer competitor. China is the long-term threat to American interests in East Asia. Russia is a declining power with a failing economy and demographic crisis. It makes no strategic sense to drive Russia into Chinese arms. But that is exactly what the United States did with Ukraine. The Ukraine war pinned American resources in Eastern Europe, depleted weapons stocks that should be reserved for potential conflict with China, and pushed Russia into a deep strategic partnership with Beijing. This is balance of power politics 101 failure. You do not create the coalition you are trying to prevent. And now the United States is about to make the same mistake with Iran. Not only is America pinned down in Ukraine, but a war with Iran would pin massive naval and air assets in the Middle East indefinitely. Think about the carrier strike groups, the bomber deployments, the missile defense systems currently dedicated to the Middle East. Those assets cannot be used in East Asia. They are not available for deterring China or defending Taiwan. And just like Ukraine drove Russia toward China, a forever war with Iran drives Iran deeper into partnership with China and Russia. You can add North Korea to that coalition as well. North Korean troops fighting alongside Russians in Ukraine. North Korea enjoying good relations with both Beijing and Moscow while having zero relationship with Washington. This is a nightmare scenario for American strategy. The United States ends up simultaneously fighting or supporting wars in Ukraine and the Middle East that drain resources, creating exactly the hostile coalition of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. That balance of power logic says you should prevent while exhausting American capacity as China builds strength and waits. The irony is profound. Iran is not a threat to the United States. It is a regional power with regional interests. The United States should have working relations with Iran, preventing nuclear weapons development while avoiding conflict that serves no American strategic interest. But instead, American policy is dictated by Israeli threat perception. And Israeli interests in destroying Iran are not the same as American interests in maintaining favorable balance of power in Eurasia. Consider the absurdity. The United States is encouraging India to reduce economic ties with Iran, cutting energy imports and transportation corridors. This makes Iran more dependent on China, strengthening China while weakening India economically. making India less capable of balancing China in South Asia. Every dimension works against American strategic interests. Mearsheimer's analysis reveals a fundamental problem. The United States is not operating according to coherent grand strategy. It is taking on the world simultaneously, confronting China, Russia, and Iran at the same time while tied down in regional conflicts that prevent focus on the primary competitor. If you are China, this is ideal. You watch the United States exhaust itself in Ukraine and the Middle East, deepen partnerships with Russia and Iran, and wait for American overextension to create openings. You build your military while America depletes stockpiles fighting wars that do not advance American interests. Every year, the United States spends pinned down in Middle East. Forever war is a year China grows stronger in East Asia. This is not sustainable. The United States cannot simultaneously contain China, confront Russia, fight Iran, and maintain military commitments across Europe, the Middle East, and the Pacific. The resources do not exist. The political will does not exist. And the strategic logic does not exist. But Israel is pushing for exactly this outcome. A forever war that keeps the United States committed to destroying Iran regardless of cost to American global position. And the question is whether American leadership understands what is being asked of them and whether they have the strategic clarity to say no. Because once this war starts, getting out will be nearly impossible. The escalation dynamics, the political commitments, the sunk costs, all of it creates momentum toward exactly the kind of open-ended conflict that Trump says he wants to avoid, but that Israel sees as acceptable or even preferable. The window Israel sees closing is not just about Iranian capabilities. It is about American willingness to fight Israel's wars. And Israel is trying to lock in American commitment now, before that willingness disappears. The tragedy is that this serves Israeli interests while undermining American strategy. And if Mearsheimer is right, the United States is walking into a trap that will define American foreign policy failure for a generation.